Hello, welcome to another episode of Curtis Jones Writing. If you're new to my channel, I'm reading every chapter of every book that I've written. I have 14 books. I'm on book Dad's Old Truck 1, Dad's Old Truck 2, Imagination, Love Endures All Things. I'm on book 5, and we're up to chapter 10 in book 5. Uh, Dad's Old Truck 1 and Dad's Old Truck 2 were the first part of my life. I've had a very interesting life, to say the least, and many strange things happen, but I remember most of them. I've recorded a lot of the stuff that's happened to me throughout my life. But from what I understand, everybody that's read them enjoys them. They think of them as entertaining and worth the time they've spent on. All the writings I do are uh, above board. They're uh, welcome in mixed company, children. There's nothing offensive in anything, and no curse languages or any innuendos that might be offensive. So I hope you enjoy them. If you get in a hurry and you want to know more about my books, you could go to my webpage, which is curtis-jones-books.squarespace.com, or you could also find it on my Facebook page, which is Curtis Jones Author page on Facebook. Uh, each of these sites have links that will take you to the Amazon site where you are able to acquire these books in either paperback or in ebook form. And some of them actually come in hardback, but I've had so many things going on, I'll probably have to wait till winter before I put some more of these up in hardback format. But I've had people that wanted to give them as gifts, and they asked about hardback, so I started converting them to hardback. I think I have 2 or 3 done, but out of 14, that's not much. The next chapter, last chapter I did was chapter 9. Let me see what the title of that was. It was Fourth Year Across the Creek. And things changed then about the end of that chapter. And chapter 10 is entitled Stay at Home Dad. Uh, it was the best choice of what to do for Stephanie and myself and the children. So I ended up being a stay-at-home dad. So let's get started. Chapter 10, Stay-at-Home Dad. We spent a week working with the employment office, and we uh, received unemployment payments. My payment was the larger of the two. We talked about needing someone at home that could work the boat, helping the others get in and out as needed because our children were still going to school 2 different times, leaving and coming home. And one of us was going to have to work going out needing help and coming back needing help. So that's where we were. Stephanie was hired about that time working at a place called OK Foods. She was hired in as a quality inspector. She really liked this job, possibly because she was working was working on the line at the last job, carving up the chickens. And this job did not entail her working on a line, or production line. We had a plan for moving forward now. At first, it was hard for me with Stephanie making the most money, knowing my unemployment would run out sooner or later. But I decided I would do some things that could generate at least some income. I first built a pig enclosure and bought 2 baby pigs. They became a kind of pet most in the family. I enjoyed the pigs, and decided to get other animals. I built a rabbit hutch and got half dozen rabbits. There were New Zealand whites. I know it didn't make any sense to me. I didn't know anything about rabbits when I did that. And some of you may, but they're good rabbits to raise for meat. I really liked the rabbits too. The pigs and rabbits were to be for food. I knew it would be hard to kill and dress the animals, but all work had to be done in a downsized way. I would get a tractor from a friend and brush hog the property. It was growing up badly. Dad helped me move the tractor from near Tulsa, Oklahoma to my place down near Fort Smith, Arkansas. It took most of a day, so we did it while the creek was low enough for Stephanie to drive in and out across it. By this time, we had traded the little Ford for a SUV. It was much bigger than the little Ford Fiesta and much newer, too. With the tractor here now, I could cut trees I wanted removed and drag them out to where I could cut them into firewood. We still used a generator for power when needed. My staying home was a very good idea because of the work required from being off grid. It took almost too much time with us both working. Stephanie helped when we were when we both worked, and that made me feel bad. With only her working and me doing all the off-grid chores, I felt better. The tractor came with a brush hog, and that allowed me to prepare a larger place for the pigs. I went to town and got an electric fence to uh, build the pen for the pigs. In order to train the pigs on the electric fence, I put it in their small pen and they learned to stay away from it almost immediately. I spent a couple of weeks working with the brush hog, or bush hog as some people call it, to get the pig pen so that the grasses would not interfere with the charged line that kept the pigs in. I built a ramp to load the pigs in my old truck and keep them there until I could drag their house to the new location for the pigs. It was a big deal, and I had to wait for help. I drug their home with the tractor to the middle of their new pen. I didn't want it to rub against the charged lines. The pigs got moved finally to their new digs. They were always busy rooting up the grasses and the weeds and the roots for eating. It cut back on our feed bill for a few days. This kept the pigs quiet until they ran out of root material inside their pen. That is when we started finding the pigs out in the mornings. The worst was yet to come, though. I spent lots of time putting the pigs back into their pen. They're very smart animals, that can play and carry out plans, it seems. These were among the most intelligent of the pigs I'd ever seen. They watched the dead limbs fall out of the trees, and the trees were about 100 foot tall. There was no way to have gotten all the dead limbs out of the trees. And when they hit the charged fence, it would short out, and it did not shock them at that time. I believe that they knew what they were doing when they waited for limbs to short out the fence before they tried to get out. There was a dead tree that had limbs that were about 10 feet above the fence and just inside their pen. These guys would rub on that tree and knock limbs out and down on the fence, rendering the electric fence without shock. Twice the limbs fell on the electric fence, and when that happened, the pigs would simply walk over the fence and come to the house. I was watching their pen when I saw them look up at the little tree and started rubbing on the side of the tree that was opposite of the limb that would fall on the fence. It fell and landed on the fence. The fence shorted out and the pig stepped through the fence. I ran out the door and started yelling at them to get back. It scared them and they started running toward the creek. When they got into the brush, the dense brush, I never saw them again. Those pigs were about half grown, and within another 4 months, they would have been ready for the butcher. Too bad we never found them, and no one else said anything about seeing them either. There was two herds of wild pigs in that part of Oklahoma. They probably found them and followed them into the natural forest or national forest, disappeared. That was the last time we tried to raise pigs. They simply outsmarted me. We did much better with goats. The problem we had with the goats was that they got on top of everything. We found them on the cars and on the pole barn. The chicken house was attached to the pole barn, and the roof of the chicken house was low enough for the goats to jump onto it from the bank behind the barn. We put the goats in the evening and let them out when we were up in the morning. They helped clear the weeds and the brush on the place. We also milked the goats and drank and I'm sorry, and didn't buy hay and didn't buy milk while we had them. When we got a newer car, we learned how difficult it was to control goats. We eventually traded all the goats to a man named Paul Powers for a large gas or propane powered refrigerator. We used this instead of ice chests after that. With ice chests, you must make a trip to buy ice every day. That can get quite expensive. Just another expense people on the grid don't have to think about. If they did, they would prefer to be on the grid. When we put the old hot point gas refrigerator in the house, we had to have help. The little thing must have weighed over 200 pounds. It was manufactured in 1945, and at that time, a lot of Americans, especially in rural areas, did not have electricity. I ran a gas line from the propane tank to power the refrigerator. It didn't require any electric to operate. It made ice with two small ice trays, the likes I hadn't seen since I was a kid. You know, the kind of ice trays that you pull up on a handle and it breaks the ice loose and then dumps it out for you when you dump it out. we actually felt wonderful about getting a refrigerator that didn't take electricity. Wow. We could keep milk and other things we had learned to do without in this refrigerator. There wasn't a lot of room in it, but a little room was a whole lot better than no room at all. We missed the goats. They followed us around like puppies. They were There were two mother goats we milked and two teenage goats. All four were female goats and they stayed close to home. Without the goats, we were back to pulling the vines out of the trees and clearing all the weeds that they had cleared for us. I was getting good at feed, at feeling. I was getting good at feeling trees, failing trees. I'm sorry, where I wanted them to fall. The trees were mostly 18 to 24 inches at the center and the bottom, and were about 100 foot tall. The trees had been growing for almost a century. I learned that my father's family had owned land in this area back when it was Indian land given through treaty to the Cherokees. They cut trees and made them into railroad ties. They hauled them to Stillwell to sell them. I think they said that they got 2 bits for each tie. That's only a quarter. A tie was 8 inches by 7 inches by 12 feet long. It was a virgin forest when they started cutting the timber. They had to use large trees to get cuts that size. It must have been very hard work. They carried only 2 wagon loads up to Stillwell each month. They would get most of our, or we would get most of our firewood for heating the house from the place, but now and again the weather would last longer, or the weather would last longer than I had anticipated. And I would see that we needed to buy wood to heat. There was an area on top of the mountain right behind us uh, where there was a commune, everybody called it. Most of the people there wanted to be pretty much left alone by the rest of society. When we lived in Fort Smith, we watched many news reports about the commune and the fact that they had an M1 tank that could fire its cannon. The news said they had ammunition for it as well. I don't know how much of that's true, but that's what the news reported. The feds raided them and took much of what they had for protection just in case our society failed. They were preppers before preppers were popular. Needless to say, they were suspicious of everyone. I knew one of the young men. His name was John. He was from there. And I told him I needed to buy some firewood. We came to an agreement. I said I would be there Sunday morning to get it. I got there about 11 a.m. and was told to go to the assembly hall. I drove up to the building that looked a little like a huge dome. There were 2 men standing guard at the door with rifles in their arms. When I stopped, they pointed the guns at me and Stephanie. We thought they were going to shoot us. They asked what we wanted here there, and we said we were supposed to come up and get firewood today. Then they lowered their guns and opened the door to their meeting place. They told someone just inside the building that we were there for firewood. They closed the door and said, "Just 1 minute." That is all they ever said to us. We didn't want anything else to do with them as long as we lived there. Now, those folks were very different from all the other folks we knew in that area. You get far enough off the grid, and there is no telling what you will find. We weren't looking to be off grid, just finding a place we could afford to live. That same year, someone bought the house that we had lived in a few years ago when we first moved out there. It was a single older woman from somewhere in Texas. She was a nice lady and she fit right in with everybody else. Everyone that lived in the area was not rich, but because everybody helped everyone that lived in Nightcut, we all got along quite well. We did a lot of bartering and trading, and that was kind of fun all in itself. If you want to know what I think a good it is a good way of life, Americans as a whole are complacent about difficulties of life because we have the utilities that do so much of the work that's required to live comfortably today. We would do well to hear the stories of our grandparents or even our great grandparents. Think about their daily lives if you've got a moment. This will conclude chapter 10. Next time, probably in a few minutes, I'll post it at a different time than this one, but probably in a few minutes, I'll do chapter 11. I'm going to try to get as much done as I can because I've got myself engaged in adding to my deck out back, and if I don't keep working at it, I'll never get it finished. And I've got to work up a sermon to preach Sunday, so uh, I'm kind of limited in what time I've got to do this, but I want to make sure I get some stuff posted every week. If you're in a hurry, you know where to go to find how to get a hold of these books. Uh, if you've got e-reader, you could probably read them for free through Amazon. Or if you're an Amazon Prime customer. And by the way, if you are an Amazon Prime customer, if you order these books in paperback, I think they ship them to you without any shipping cost. You ought to give them a try, see what you think. If you enjoy the stories I tell, subscribe to me so you'll get them as I produce them, and and then share them with friends. Let them see if they would like to hear these stories because these stories will soon be forgotten. The world changed so quickly. Love you and take care, and thank you for supporting me. Bye bye.